The Sovereignty sank the carrier Kestrel on the 4th of March. She reported for duty again on the 9th. Chief Engineer Ada Brandt was in the aft reactor space when the torpedoes hit, and she felt her ship die the way you feel a friend stop breathing. 3 impacts, port side, deep. The Kestrel rolled, went dark, and began the long fall toward the gas giant below while her escorts screamed, and her fighters circled their sinking home like gulls. Everyone understood what it meant. Humanity had one fleet carrier. One. The war against the Sovereignty was 8 months old, and their doctrine had been printed in fire across every engagement. Kill the flight deck, and the human fleet goes blind. 200 enemy analysts existed, the intelligence people said, whose entire job was ending this single ship. The abandoned ship order sounded. 2/3 of the crew went to the pods by the book. Ada Brandt did not go to the pods. She stood in the dying reactor space with her senior chiefs around her, all of them holding handrails as the deck tilted, and she performed the assessment that became fleet legend, the one now printed inside the hatch of every damage control locker in the service. She put her bare hand against the reactor casing, still warm. She looked at the structural board, broken everywhere but broken like bones, not like glass. "She is not dead," Brandt said. "She is down. There is a difference, and I intend to be the difference." 400 volunteers stayed aboard. They caught the Kestrel's fall with 2 engines and stubbornness, stabilized her orbit, and held her together until the tugs came the next day. The Sovereignty logged a confirmed carrier kill and reassigned its hunters. That clerical decision would eventually cost them the war. The tugs took the Kestrel to a place that did not exist. The crews called it the Hole. It was a hollowed asteroid in an uncharted cluster, a mining relic refitted in secret during the first month of the war, when someone at Fleet Command had accepted a hard truth. Humanity could not build a second carrier in time, but it might, just barely, keep rebuilding the first one. What happened inside the Hole over the next 5 days rewrote every manual on battle repair. There was no time for proper yard work, so Brandt invented improper yard work. Whole compartments were not fixed, but replaced, cut from the hulks of 2 decommissioned liners towed in for the purpose. The portside armor came off a mothballed freighter. Half the flight deck arrived as prefabricated highway bridge sections, requisitioned from a colony construction project, their traffic markings still visible under the new coating. Her crews worked in shifts that ignored every regulation Brandt was later charged with ignoring. The charges were dismissed. The tribunal's ruling was one sentence. Results may be argued with, but not these. On the 9th of March, the Kestrel left the Hole under her own power, ugly as a scrapyard and fully operational. Her returning fighter wings, redistributed among escort ships for 5 awful days, came home to her deck in a stream that had half the pilots weeping openly on the landing channel. She rejoined the battle line at the Callisto Shoals on the 11th, and her first strike caught a Sovereignty battle group in flagrant confidence, cruising without carrier threat protocols, because their own records said no carrier existed. The enemy commander's last transmission before losing 3 ships was a demand for clarification that human signals crews have cherished ever since. "Confirm identity of hostile flight deck. We sank the hostile flight deck. What is launching these fighters?" The stakes of the war were never complicated, and Brandt recited them to every new draft of engineers who came aboard. 1 carrier. As long as the Kestrel flew, human fleets had eyes, reach, and teeth, and the Sovereignty advance stayed stalled at the outer colonies. The day she died for good, the war became a countdown. Every colony evacuation plan, every treaty contingency, every dark projection in every ministry drawer began with the same sentence, following the loss of the carrier. So the Sovereignty came for her again, properly this time. The second sinking happened at the Battle of the Hyades Reach in June, and it was no lucky torpedo spread. The enemy committed 2 battle groups and a specialist hunting squadron. They accepted brutal losses from her fighter wings, wore down her escorts across 19 hours, and put 11 heavy warheads into her core. The Kestrel burned. This time the dying was worse. This time there were names, 190 of them, and Brandt stood at the memorial muster in the wreckage of her own engineering spaces and heard the roll while the ship drifted powerless around her. The Sovereignty logged their second confirmed kill of the same carrier. Their intelligence service noted, in a report captured after the war, a small anomaly in the wreck's behavior. Its pumps were still running. The tugs came under cover of a diversionary raid that cost the fleet dearly and was judged worth it without discussion. The Kestrel crawled back to the hole with her dead aboard, and Brant walked the ruined hangar with her chiefs, and the assessment this time took an hour. Her verdict became the yard's motto, welded over the main dock doors. "She is down again," Brant said, "so we are up again, bring me the liners." The second resurrection took 19 days, and the ship that emerged from the hole in July was measurably no longer the ship that had launched in spring. 40% of her by mass had been born as something else. Liner cabins served as crew berthing. A colony water plant heat exchanger cooled her reactors. Her new forward catapult had spent its previous life launching ore buckets at a mining station, and her replacement sensor mast was donated, complete and lovingly crated, by the merchant crews of the convoy she had saved at Callisto. The crews called her the Quilt now, with the fierce tenderness sailors reserved for ugly ships. Brant allowed it. Privately, she preferred it. A quilt her grandmother had taught her is not a blanket that failed. It is a blanket with witnesses. She returned to the line in August, and the Sovereignty's response was recovered years later from their war archives. And it is studied now by every officer of both fleets, because it marks the exact place where a machine of war began to break on a question of belief. The intelligence assessment prepared for their high command ran to 60 pages. Its problem was simple. A carrier confirmed destroyed in March had fought in April. A carrier confirmed destroyed in June had fought in August. Their analysts had photographs, hull profiles, deck layouts. The ships were identical, and the ships were impossible. No Navy, the assessment concluded, repairs capital ships at this rate. The report's authors chose the only explanation their doctrine permitted. Humanity had at least 3 identical carriers, built in secret, rotated through battle under a single name, as deliberate deception. It would take 60 more days before the fiction of the Phantom Fleet grew teeth. What it did then decided everything, and Brant would learn about it the hard way because the first consequence was a hunt for the whole. If 3 carriers existed, then somewhere a yard existed that built and hid them, and in September the Sovereignty stopped hunting the Kestrel and started hunting her nest. The hunt was methodical and terrifying. Survey squadrons swept the asteroid clusters along every route the carrier had ever taken. Deep space listening posts strained for the electromagnetic whisper of dock machinery. Twice, enemy scouts passed within a light minute of the hole, while every machine inside sat silent, and 4,000-yard workers breathed through filters in the dark. The second pass was too close, and Fleet Command made the kind of decision that wins wars and ruins sleep. The hole needed a decoy, and a decoy needed to be found, and being found needed to look expensive. So they built a fake yard around a real sacrifice. An old dock hulk, towed to a plausible cluster, dressed in scaffolding, wrapped in the radio signature of heavy industry, and staffed by volunteers who kept its lights and its transmissions alive. Every crew rotation, the shuttle out carried people who knew the odds. The Sovereignty found it in October and committed a battle group to its destruction, and the volunteers ran the deception to the final hour, transmitting panicked yard traffic and the unmistakable sensor ghost of a carrier hull under construction, right up until the strike went in. 11 of the last shift did not get clear. Their names are on the wall at the Fleet Academy, under a single word, shipwrights. The enemy announced the destruction of the Phantom carrier yard. Their fleet stood down from the hunt. Their analysts filed the mystery as solved. And in the true hole, in the silent dark, 4,000-yard workers listened to the announcement, observed 1 minute for the 11, and then turned their machines back on. Brant marked the moment in the yard log. "They believe the lie because the truth is worse," she wrote. "The truth is that there was never a fleet of carriers. There was only ever a species that will not stay sunk." The third sinking came in November. At the battle everyone knew was coming, at the place everyone knew it would come, the fortress junction the fleets called the Gate of Storms. The stakes had sharpened all autumn. The Sovereignty offensive was rebuilt and massive, aimed at the inner colonies, and the human fleet met it at the junction with everything, and everything meant her. The Kestrel flew at the center of the line. launching strike after strike into a battle that filled half a light minute with fire. She lasted 11 hours. The enemy paid 4 capital ships to reach her and reached her, and this time their weapons crews stayed on target past all reason, hammering the burning carrier until their own escorts dragged them off. No ship survives that. The Kestrel, on fire from bow to stern, flight deck breached in 3 places, kept launching anyway. Her last sortie of the battle went off a deck crewed by cooks and clerks in vacuum gear, 90 seconds before the order to abandon stations forward. And the battle turned, not because of her guns, because every human crew at the junction could see her, burning and launching, and there is no order a fleet obeys more completely than the one a legend gives without transmitting anything. The line held. The offensive broke on it. The Sovereignty withdrew from the Gate of Storms with a 3rd confirmed kill of the same impossible ship logged in their records, and their fleet's belief in their own information dying somewhere behind their eyes. The Kestrel could not make the journey to the Hole this time, so the Hole, in absolute secrecy, came to her. Every transportable rig, every crew, every spare the yard possessed, ferried across 3 systems in civilian hulls. Brant stood in the wreck of her hangar and gave the 3rd assessment. Her chiefs waited. "This one costs the yard," she said quietly, "everything it has. Ask me if she is worth it." Nobody asked. They were already unpacking. The 3rd resurrection consumed the Hole, exactly as Brant had said it would, and what it could not provide, the species did. The yard stripped itself to keep her alive. Dock cranes were cut apart and welded into hull frames. The Hole's own reactor went aboard, leaving the asteroid on battery lights. When the yard's stores ran dry with the ship half whole, Fleet Command took the unprecedented step of telling the public the truth and asking. What came back has no precedent in the history of war production. Colony machine shops turned out deck plating to broadcast specifications. School workshops built pump housings. A retired liner captain sailed his own ship to the rendezvous and donated it entire, walking off with the ship's cat and the ship's bell and refusing a receipt. 11,000 crates arrived in 6 weeks, and the quartermasters wept over the manifests because half the crates carried notes. For the quilt, come home again. The carrier that left the dark in January was 1/3 donated, mismatched past any pretense of design, and the most loved object the species had ever built. Her crew stenciled the donor names along the hangar walls. Every town, every school, every ship, 11,000 entries, and pilots touched them for luck on the way to the catapults. Meanwhile, in the enemy's councils, the Phantom Fleet was completing its work. Captured records show the winter clearly. Sovereignty planning now assumed 3 to 5 human carriers, all unaccounted for. Their winter offensive was cancelled. The fleets held back to guard against Phantom flight decks. 2 of their best admirals were dismissed for questioning the carrier estimate. Their strategy had become a hostage to a ship that would not die and a number that had never existed. Humanity had 1 carrier, 1 exhausted yard, and no margin at all. The Sovereignty had 300 warships and was afraid. The war's last battle was fought in March, 1 year to the week from the first sinking, and its shape was decided by arithmetic that only one side knew was fiction. The Sovereignty finally moved, but it moved defensively in one vast formation, keeping half its strength perpetually ready for the Phantom carriers that would surely strike from the dark. 300 ships arranged around a fear. Human Fleet Command built its entire plan on that arrangement. The real fleet, every hull that could fight, struck the formation head-on at the Meridian Deeps. And at the crisis of the battle, with the enemy's reserve still guarding empty space, the Kestrel arrived out of the dust shoals on the enemy's flank, launching everything, her donated deck plates streaming vapor, her 11,000 names hurled into the fight. The enemy reserve did not respond. Recovered orders show why, and it is the purest monument the Phantom Fleet ever earned. Their reserve commander held position against the other carriers. The 3 to 5 that intelligence promised were surely inbound, and held, while the only carrier humanity had ever owned took his battle line apart from the flank. By the time the truth was undeniable, it was also unaffordable. The formation cracked. The Sovereignty fleet fought its way out of the deeps at the cost of 1/3 of its strength, and sued for terms within a month. And the captured minutes of their final war council contain the sentence that human historians have never stopped quoting. We were not defeated by their fleet. We were defeated by our own refusal to believe that one ship, sunk 3 times, was one ship. The Kestrel took her final wounds in the last hour of the battle, and this time, when the fires were out, Brant walked the hangar and made no assessment at all. She just stood there a while, hand on a frame that had been a highway bridge among 11,000 names. Enough, she told the ship gently. You can rest now, we won. The accounting afterward took years, the way it does, and the strangest ledger belonged to the enemy. The sovereignty under the armistice opened its archives, and human historians finally traced the Phantom Fleet from birth to victory. It had never been planned. No deception office invented it. It was born in an enemy analyst's refusal to accept an impossible repair rate, and it grew because every fresh impossibility fed it. The Kestrel's 3 resurrections had created, in the enemy's mind, between 2 and 4 entire capital ships that never existed. And those ghost ships had pinned real fleets, canceled real offensives, and stood guard over empty space at the decisive hour. Brant was asked at the armistice hearings whether the fleet had known and exploited the enemy's belief. Her answer is in the transcript. We learned of it late, she said. We exploited it at the deeps, yes. But no one built the lie. You built it yourselves from a true thing you could not accept. If you want a lesson for your academies, take this one. We never had 3 carriers. We had 4,000-yard hands, 11,000 crates from home, and a chief's rule about the difference between dead and down. Count refusals as ships, and yes, we outnumbered you badly. The sovereignty took the lesson. Their naval academy teaches the Kestrel campaign under a title that translates, roughly, as the arithmetic of will, and their cadets are required to answer one examination question that has no numeric solution. It asks, how many carriers did humanity possess in the year of the war? The approved answer, marked correct for 40 years now, is 1, and that was the problem. The whole was rebuilt, publicly this time, as the fleet's great repair yard, and its dock doors still carry the motto from the second sinking. The 11 shipwrights of the decoy have their wall. The donor rolls have their archive. And the Kestrel herself was offered, with honors, the retirement every warship earns. She declined it, or rather her chief did on her behalf, in the manner that settled the matter permanently. The Kestrel serves still, not as a museum and not any longer as a weapon. Brant's proposal, submitted the week of the armistice and approved before the ink dried, gave the old carrier the only third life that fit. She became the fleet's rescue and disaster ship, the largest responder ever commissioned, her hangars converted to hospitals and habitat modules, her catapults launching relief craft instead of strikes. The ship that would not stay sunk now goes, at flank speed, wherever something else is sinking. She has answered colony quakes, station fires, and foundering liners. She was first on scene at the Reef Cascade collapse, both fleets' academies now note, where her crews pulled 900 survivors out of the dark, and where the second ship on scene, by no coincidence anyone believes, was a sovereignty-heavy cruiser whose captain had fought at the deeps, and who requested the honor of holding the Kestrel's perimeter, and whose log entry for the operation was 5 words long. The Ghost does good work. Ada Brant stayed with her ship to the end of her service and passed it, taking the keeper's post the fleet invented rather than argue. She trained 30 years of damage control officers aboard the living syllabus of the ship herself, every mismatched frame a lesson, every donor name a footnote. Her course concluded, always at the same bulkhead, the one preserved unrepaired from the third sinking, scorched and buckled, with the little brass plate she permitted only after retirement. Here on this frame it says, 3 navies worth of intelligence analysts concluded that this ship could not exist. The frame respectfully disagreed. Cadets of 2 fleets touch it for luck now. Sovereignty exchange officers touch it twice. Because the lesson of the Kestrel was never about carriers, and both navies know it. It is welded over the dock doors of the hull, where a chief once put her hand on a warm reactor casing while everything fell, and told the universe there was a difference. Dead is a fact, down is a decision. Decide if this story stayed with you, subscribe. A new one leaves Earth every day.